All right, what's up? Welcome in. It is GC Live, Wes Mitchell, Chris Clark, Tuesday episode of the show. Hope y'all are doing well. As always, this episode brought to you by our friend Clint Hammond of CMG Home Loans, ClintHammond.com, 803-422-6797, that phone number, NMLS number 71597. Obviously, if you're in the market to buy a new home, Clint's your guy. If you're not in the market, you can still call Clint and talk a little bit of ball. But for the most part, all we ask is if that is something you might be interested in doing or you're in the market to buy a new home, give Clint, our presenting sponsor here, a chance to earn your business. Again, that phone number, 803-422-6797. Chris Clark, welcome back.
Hello, sir. How are we doing?
We are good, man. We're good. Hey, did you think Kentucky could beat Ole Miss?
Oh, wow. Coming out firing. Yes. Did I pick Kentucky? No, I did not pick Kentucky. But, honestly, sitting here on the Tuesday after, am I just completely and utterly shocked that Kentucky won? No. And here's the biggest reason, man. Ole Miss had not been tested at all. And actually, Wes, I recorded a podcast spot with Neil McCready today, who we'll probably have on our radio show on Thursday. And, Neil agreed with that notion when I brought it up. But, I've been talking about all week, like, hey, Ole Miss had not really played anybody. Their biggest test was Wake Forest. Neil said it was Georgia Southern. He was like, no, Georgia Southern was the best team that they played. So this was their first real test, and they did not pass it. So Kentucky, I think, gave Ole Miss a lot of problems with how they structure their defense. That's something that Shane Beamer actually pointed out today, Wes, that, that's a reason you can't copy and paste, what they did. That was a term that you used earlier this week, and you're right. Kentucky's defensive structure is unique. It's different than a lot of other teams that play in this conference. Ole Miss didn't play particularly well, and Kentucky made, really at the end of the day, one more play. So that was what we were kind of waiting on, right? This is an Ole Miss team that's gone up and down the field on everybody, but they were going to have to prove it, and they were going to have to do it against a quality opponent for the first time. And they ran into that, didn't pass that test. And frankly, man, Ole Miss is now sitting there going, well, we still should have won that game. There's a lot of similarities, actually, I think, in Ole Miss feeling how they feel after that Kentucky game and how South Carolina felt after the LSU game, except one key difference. Ole Miss seems a little bit more down on themselves, whereas the LSU game for the Gamecocks actually probably gave them a little bit more confidence and momentum heading into a bye week.
Yeah, I'll give Lane Kiffin credit. Like he pointed out several of the reasons that they lost that game. And did Kentucky have some breaks? Yeah, I think you would agree they did. The game-winning touchdown was on a fumble. So, they got some breaks in the game. But if you're Lane Kiffin, if you're Ole Miss, you're sitting there going, well, we should not have given them the opportunities to where these breaks mattered. And, I think certainly on paper, this is a game where they were favored by more than 2 touchdowns. So it's like, all right, you let a team like that hang around, then sometimes, we know this oddly shaped ball can just bounce a number of ways. So, I think you look at that, kudos to Kentucky. They sort of brought Ole Miss down to earth, and now we're all sitting there kind of questioning, frankly, like, all right, was this one game? Is Kentucky a little bit better than we thought? I think all these things can be true. Is Ole Miss not quite as good as we thought they were? Like, what is the reality of the situation? And the beauty of football, man, is you can even sometimes look back on it at the end of a season and be like, that made no sense. Sometimes as the season goes along, you start to get like Georgia Tech beating FSU week 1. Many, many, many people made that about Georgia Tech. Like, hey, huge win for Georgia Tech. Now it's just like, get in line. Like, can we play FSU? Honestly,
Yeah, you're right.
It changes your perception. And the more data you get as a year goes on, the more you can sort of put all the little pieces together, right? Well, I think we're still putting the pieces together with Ole Miss. We know they're talented. That is very clear. And when I say talented, I think we know they are talented on like a national level, on like I think a top 10 type level. However, that does not always make a football team. And so I mean, dude, I'm listening to these podcasts and they're like already having existential crisis conversations about, is Lane Kiffin the coach we think he is? And I'm like, let's slow this thing down just a little bit based on one loss. Now, this O-line, you start to say, all right, there have been some questions there throughout the season so far. It maybe has not been quite as apparent against some of these lesser opponents, but you've got a quarterback who is very good, but has been getting hit quite a bit. And so we are at that point of the year where we still don't have all the answers, but answers are starting to become clear. And the one thing I keep seeing referenced about Ole Miss is how their margin for error has all of a sudden shrank to absolutely nothing, just about, because this is a program that came into this season. This is a team that came into this season saying, hey, playoff or bust. And I look at their schedule. I don't know, even with them being in the SEC, I don't know if they have a schedule that will be given the benefit of the doubt the way, a Georgia, even like a South Carolina, like the schedule they're playing. Like there's going to be some SEC schools, depending on what the rest of the country does. Like I feel like there could be a 3-loss SEC playoff team in this thing. I don't know that Ole Miss is going to be one that gets that benefit of the doubt. They just did not, like, they sort of drew one of the better SEC schedules you can have, which means, in my opinion, I'm still not panicking over that loss if I'm Ole Miss, but you don't want to start 0-2 in SEC play, obviously, if you're them.
Well, yeah, not only the benefit of the doubt of the schedule to leave yourself some wiggle room, Wes, but when you start looking at this, and again, important not to, Ole Miss could run the table, make the playoff, win the title. Like, they are talented enough, in my opinion, to do that. So could the Kentucky game end up being what we've seen teams do in the past? They had a bad game, they lost, and then they didn't lose again. Maybe, I don't know. But the reality is they did lose that game. It exposed some issues there Kentucky was able to take advantage of. And now you're going from basically not being challenged on your schedule to you're going to be challenged just about every week. Go to South Carolina, tough place to play. What's your biggest issue been? Probably pass protection, right? As you said, Jackson Dart's been hit too many times. Kentucky sacked him 4 times. He was under pressure. He wasn't able to do what he does really well, and that's throw the ball down the field. South Carolina, what's their strength? Pass rush, right? So you can easily see this thing being a road game. I mean, I don't have my pick in yet, Wes. I don't know what it's going to be yet, frankly, here on Tuesday. But would it be a shock if South Carolina won this game? No. Then, like you said, you're 0-2 in the SEC. You're not going to have the strength of schedule. Then you look at the fact of what do you do after South Carolina if you're Ole Miss? Then you got to go to Baton Rouge and play LSU. You've got Georgia on the schedule. You have Oklahoma coming into town. They have a pretty darn good defense, including defensive line. So this schedule has kind of a mix between you play kind of the worst teams, some of the worst teams in the league, and then you're out of conference. There's just nothing there in terms of strength of schedule. So now you look at this thing and you could say, yeah, they could run the table and make the playoff, or they could drop 2, 3, heck, maybe even 4 games. And if you do that, if you're Ole Miss, you're probably on the outside looking in. So this is a big, big week, big game, actually, quietly, for Ole Miss this weekend.
Well, you always, I think, when you have a portal beat team or a portal constructed team, I should say, if you start getting beat a couple times, do those teams stay together quite as much as maybe a more high school structured team? And I don't know. We're still learning this, but I just think there can be a little bit more of a house of cards feel when you kind of are built that way, as opposed to having a little bit more structure in the foundation of your roster. So I don't think we're at that point yet, but it happens quickly. So what happens if this group has to deal with a little bit more adversity in terms of on the field this week if they're down early, and also in terms of just the overall feel of this season if they have a second loss on the slate if you're Ole Miss? I mean, these are all things that, again, I think it's too early to necessarily start to worry about out there if you're an Ole Miss fan. But for one, that's what fans do. They worry. And two, it can just happen really, really quickly. And you're starting to see personnel questions about who's out there. They're questioning the game plan on offense. Why is this running back out there? Why is that running back not? Dart has been heavily involved to an extent in the running game as well, which I think is something that you want to make teams prepare for, and you want to make defenses, I would say, adjust to where they try to take him away, because you want to have that run threat, but you don't, if you're Ole Miss, necessarily want Dart as your just top guy, like your main running threat. And, the running game has been okay this year. It has not been to the level of what their passing game was certainly before this week. I mean, the passing game got slowed down its tracks a little bit versus Kentucky as well. And, you talked about the structure, and Beamer talked about the structure, Chris. This Kentucky defense was kind of built to make a team like Ole Miss show that they can just go down the field by taking small chunks. And, I don't think they're necessarily built to want to do that. And certainly they're not built to want to get into what is the football equivalent of a Frank Martin style basketball game where, use whatever cliche, like a rock fight. That's what they were in. They were in this was an old school SEC game. Like you had Lane Kiffin, of all people, going back to let's punt and play defense on fourth down. And then somehow, if this was a Netflix episode, I would think maybe the two brains got switched, because you have Kiffin punting in arguably favorable situations, and you got Stoops saying, I'm about to roll the dice on 4th and 7. And it worked. I still don't know if it was the right call, but it worked and won the game.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it, closely matched game. That's what it came down to. A 4th and 7 backed up, great individual play by Berry and Brown, catch and run. And then to your point earlier, Wes, about how the ball bounces, Kentucky has a nice run. They you might say they're going to score anyway, but who knows what happens. Fumble the ball, lands right in their tight end's arms, and he scores a touchdown, right? So you kind of had the upset formula there, and that you're able to stymie what your opponent wants to do. You get some big plays, you get some breaks, right? And Wes, I don't think you can just say, hey, look at what Kentucky did. Just do what they do. That's not how it works, right? You don't run Kentucky's defense. Even in the benefit of a bye week, you're not going to go out there and install Kentucky's defensive scheme, right? You're built different than Kentucky anyway. Can you take some elements, small pieces? Sure. Philosophically, can you take some things that we saw in that game? Absolutely. And some of those are things you were going to do in any football game. But a big one that stood out to me, Jackson Dart really good throwing the football down the field this year. Again, yes, the caveat, poor competition. But with Ole Miss's receivers, their skill guys, with Jackson Dart's arm, he can certainly throw the football very well with the way Kiffin schemes things. They're able to hit you with explosive plays. Dart was just 1 of 7, no touchdowns against Kentucky on throws 20 yards or greater, right? And that goes back to Kentucky philosophically, as you pointed out, Wes. They want to make you earn it, make you go up and down the field on them more consistently. If you hit explosive plays, they're probably going to struggle more. That's what South Carolina hit them with. They had some explosive plays on them. That ended up sealing the deal against Kentucky. So South Carolina, I think, has to avoid giving up those big plays if you're looking for an early key. Make Ole Miss earn it, go up and down the field on you. Somebody in the comments said, Ole Miss, maybe they go to more quick game, short passing game this week. Maybe so, right? That's certainly, you feel better about that than, hey, Jackson Dart throwing the football up and down the field, because eventually they're probably going to hit one of those on you, and that's what they're really, really good at.
Yeah, they are. And, they'll have a new game plan. That's the other reason you can't copy and paste. Like, you're not going to hit them twice with the same approach, I think. And this is a Carolina defense, I think, that just plays a lot more man coverage, plays a lot more combo coverage. You look at Kentucky, they kind of do what they do, and you almost know what you're going to get from them schematically for the most part, but they just do it so well when they're on. Now, the one part of this that I think you can take away is you should feel good that Kentucky was able to get pressure. And can Carolina do the same up front? Even though even the defensive lines are built differently. Kentucky, you're talking about big, strong, physical. South Carolina, you're talking about just athletic, quick twitch. Like, you can't get a hold of my guy because Kennard and Dylan Stewart are just too quick for these SEC offensive linemen to handle. And so, I think even then it's going to look a little bit different structurally, but there should be something to take away from that. Somebody in the comments mentioned earlier, a lot of it's going to depend on, for South Carolina, the health of Lenora Sellers and Rocket Sanders. And I would add Jared Brown in there as well. Obviously, that's going to be a big part of it. And Chris, little bit of an update from Beamer today. This was a typical Tuesday injury update. We'll get a more official injury update on Wednesday, which will be, in the form of one word, and it's going to be probable, questionable, doubtful. I don't think it'll be out with any of those guys. I think this is still trending towards a certain direction. Beamer, I'll give you all the quote here. Beamer tried to just do the general injury report. Then he got asked, and first he was asked specifically about Lenoris. He said he was good today. He did everything in practice for sure. And so then otherwise he said Lenoris and Rocket were both out there. They both looked good. Were they 100%? I wouldn't say they were 100%, but they both told me they felt great. And they look good, and they'll both be able to do even more tomorrow, I would think, as well. So, we're still in the monitoring phase of this thing. I think when people say, all right, are they going to play on Saturday? What's their status for Saturday? Are they good to go? I tend to think, based on what I've heard, based on what I've picked up, that Lenoris is ahead of where Rocket is. When you're talking about ankles, a lot of it is going to just depend on, like, hey, what does that thing look like tomorrow? What's it look like Thursday? Like, I know we kind of get caught up in well, hey, do the coaches already know if they're in or out and all that? Sometimes that is the case. But I think with this, it's truly going to be a matter of just seeing how they continue to respond to treatment, seeing where they're at physically. And then is there a pain management aspect? Yes. But at those positions, when you're talking about an ankle, I think it's really more about, can you play your game if you're Lenoris, if you're Rocket, or if you're Jared Brown, who really has not been talked about by the fan base as much, but is another big injury as well.
Yeah, for sure. And look, the effectiveness is big. You've got, physically, can he play / is there going to be, a possibility of damage, et cetera, when you put a guy out? You've got pain management. You've also got the effectiveness. And that's why Lenore Sellers came back in the LSU game and the staff ultimately pulled him. Shane Beamer referenced that in a press conference. Say we got out there, we saw him on a zone read. A lot of times he's keeping that ball. He hands it off, didn't look comfortable. He didn't feel like he could play his game or that he was comfortable physically. So that's why you take him out. So you think about Rocket, same thing this time with Lenoris. You think about Rocket Sanders, an ankle for a running back. You're making hard cuts. You're taking a beating in there. You're trying to hold up and have a base and pass protection. There's a lot to it. Sure, you can say just tape it up and get out there, but it's a little bit more nuanced, a little bit more complex than that. But look, Wes, I mean, Jared Brown too, that has kind of flown under the radar. It has been forgotten a bit. This is a position where South Carolina needs to continue to make strides and have progress. Jared Brown is one of the guys on this team that, he's got some wiggle. He's got some downfield ability. He's got some explosive ability. They need him to continue coming along. And, that's the one that I feel like we have a little bit of a sense on some of these guys. I feel like we have maybe the least sense of where Jared Brown may be. Just my opinion, but just going off of kind of what we've heard behind the scenes, plus what Beamer's been talking about.
Yeah, I mean, we want to continue to monitor these things. I tend to think, based on what I've heard, that Lenoris will play Saturday. But again, don't want to say anything definitively until we know for sure, obviously, and we'll see on those other guys. But certainly, Rocket, I mean, this guy was brought in to be a difference maker. That's what he's been. That's who he's been. And, Carolina, a better team when they have him out there able to help out. And I know they have depth at running back, but certainly you'd much rather have Rocket than not have Rocket available for the team on Saturday. So we'll see what that looks like. A team, Chris, at this point that has not been – it's like they've not been snake bit by the injury bug like we saw last year where they've just stacked injury after injury after injury. But it has been more so like a few nagging things on a couple of guys that you just did not want to see get injured. So everybody deals with injuries on a year-to-year basis. And for them, luckily, knock on wood, they've not had like the big blow, but they have started to have some things stack up a little bit with guys that you do not want to lose. And Martin here says, I hope Gamecocks made great strides over the bye week. You know what? That sort of brings something to mind, Chris. What do you think we see Saturday that we did not see in the first 4 games? Because if there's one thing you can give credit to Beamer's staff to over every single year he's been here, is that they've done a really good job of rallying into the latter parts of a year, even when it hasn't been pretty at times in the early parts of the year, improving as the season progresses and finding a way to put themselves in position to win games late. Now, it's a little bit different this year that, for one, you have 2 bye weeks. This is a very early bye week, and you're 3-1. So you're not sitting there going, hey, guys, we got to just reinvent an offense or reinvent a defense. What wrinkles would you like to see based on what we've seen, what we know? Somebody says maybe Matt Fuller plays a little bit more. Beamer did mention in the teleconference last week, there's some guys they want to see get the football more. And, he said even before the Akron game, we want to see the running backs, other than Rocket, get the football a little bit more. So I'm curious, what do you think are some changes we might see?
I'm sure that offensively we'll probably see a play or two where you go, we hadn't seen that this year, right? I have no clue what that will be, but safe to say we'll see that. I think it's a great point that you are 3-1, right? And the game that you lost, you very well could have won, right? So you're not sitting there going, man, we got to look at a total overhaul here. What you're looking at is what's gone well, what's gone not so well, and what can we adjust. And so I even look, Wes, I mean, defensively, that picture's been pretty good for South Carolina. but there have been some issues in there. I mean, look at, second half of the LSU game, for instance. LSU made some adjustments. Old Dominion game, there were some negative things. Kentucky, certainly not as many negative things there, but just on a micro level, there's probably a few things here and there. I think the run game, Wes, is one. I think the way that South Carolina plays defense, frankly, with their hair on fire, is, they cause chaos. That leaves some openings to, a run to pop out here and there. Maybe you miss a tackle because you're flying around the football. Maybe you don't have gap integrity at times. I think you want to keep that, wreaking havoc, chaotic aspects of your defense going, because that's what got you here. But can you take this bye week and get a little bit better on some coaching points? Can you adjust some things schematically? Hey, we've seen this situation a couple of times on film where we've done this, the other team's countered with this, and we've gotten hit on it. What can we do to make that aspect better? Offensively, obviously, I think there's even more work to be done on there, right? So pass protection, what some people may say, let the tight ends and backs help out more. Well, they've been credited with some sacks as well this season. So what can you do to help your quarterbacks in pass protection? What can you do to have coaching points to have them get rid of the ball quicker? What do you have schematically? And what can you do to spread the wealth a little bit more, getting the ball to some different guys, as you referenced? So I think it's a lot of smaller things that all add up to the bigger picture during a bye week.
Yeah, and I think, man, whenever you talk about, hey, help them out, max protect, add a tight end and pass there's a give and take to all that, So every time for any player that you're putting as a guy to help out in pass pro, that's one less receiver you have available to throw the football to. So I think there's always give and take. You can chip, you can do some different things, but if you chip, you're saying, all right, chip him, then go out into your route. You're slowing down, like you're limiting that route tree at that point. So I think some of it schematic, some of it's just playing better. Some of it is, hey, no one in this situation, we can't take a sack. So on one side of that, let's drill it in the quarterback's head. Like, the ball has got to get out. You cannot take a sack in this situation. The other side of that is, hey, maybe we don't have quite as long of a developing route in this situation because we know we can't take a sack. Let's try to run a little bit more of a quick hitter. Like, I think there are all types of things you can look at. I even thought it was fascinating. So Lulu from Greenville News, she always has some questions that get Shane Beamer thinking. And so she also gets some really just genuine answers from him. And she asked him, and I'm paraphrasing, she basically asked him, all right, when you say, hey, that's on me about a particular issue in a game, like, hey, that's my fault, what do you do to fix that, basically? And, I don't think there's a specific answer to that question if you're asking it generally, because you don't know what the thing was. Was it a play call? Was it a teaching point? Was it a personnel decision? But Beamer instantly gave us the plays that have probably kept him up at night during his time at South Carolina. And I thought it was kind of fascinating. Some people remember the safety late in the half against Georgia. That was the day when Carolina played at Athens and they just got beat up. Like, it was just, and that was one of those plays where you're like, all right, that was a amateur, like that was a first year coach decision. And he's probably like, why did I do that? Well, it's true. Like, he's like,
I mean, you're right. Yeah.
What was that? Then he mentioned the fake punt by Notre Dame in the Gator Bowl. And he's going, they're in a different look. And I'm guessing there's probably a moment where you're like, should I burn a timeout? But if you're making this decision, I mean, like in splits of seconds, right? You're like, oh no, I think we have it covered. Then it pops out huge play in the game for Notre Dame. So you're just kicking yourself. And let's see, there was another one. Not going for it on 4th down last year against Clemson around midfield late in the game. That was one I did at the time. I was like, I don't know about that decision. But I thought that was in a age when coaches don't always give you those genuine, everything is coach speak, everything is this, that, and the other. I thought those were some like fascinating answers and some genuine answers to the plays during this 3+ years that have kept Shane Beamer up at night.
Yeah, that was a really good answer. That fake field goal, Wes, I think you and I both heard a story on that. I heard a story, and I think you were there, that maybe we'll be able to tell one day, but we can't tell it today. But certainly there were a lot of people kicking themselves on that Notre Dame field goal because I think there was a sense of
you talking about the fake punt?
The fake punt. Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah. The fake punt. Yeah, I don't know why I said field goal. Yeah, the punt fake for Notre Dame that went for the score. There were a lot of people after that game that were like, something was off there, and we should have done more. So no, that was cool. I think it was a good answer because when you walk away from press conferences, you're going to get some boilerplate, you're going to get some coach speak, you're going to get the injury update that's not really an injury update yet. And the good news about that part is in 2024 in the SEC, we now at least get a pretty accurate picture in the actual written SEC injury update reports. But you want to get something that's a little bit more than that. And I think Beamer, a lot of times, not just today, but sometimes he'll deliver with those types of things. Wes, let's tell the people about our friend Brad Moore over at Legion Investigative Group. Brad Moore is a great guy, Gamecock, based out of Atlanta. He can do so much for you at Legion Investigative Group. If you need a private investigator for whatever it may be, he can help you with that. Background checking people, concerned about ID theft. If you're a business owner who is requiring some due diligence before you're making critical decisions, you can rely on Brad and his experienced team to help uncover the truth so you don't have to worry. It's hard to know who to trust with your business, your investments, even your personal life. Brad and his team at Legion Investigative Group, they can help protect what matters most. That's your assets, your identity, your peace of mind. Wes, as we know, a lot of people trying to steal IDs out there, and there are a lot of companies out there that will help you on the back end of that. Like if you have your ID stolen, that can be a tough process. If you've had that happen, Brad can help you. But one really cool thing about him and his services, he can help you before. So you can give him a call, free consultation. He can help you protect your assets before so that you have a much less chance of your ID being stolen. LegionINVgroup.com, Legion Investigative Group. And Brad Moore can be reached at 770-235-7676.
Brad, a huge Gamecock fan too. So as we always say, support Gamecock fans out there. And if that's a service you might need, hit up Brad. And certainly appreciate Brad. Good dude, good friend of ours, and also appreciate him supporting GC Live here. Let's close this thing out here shortly, man. We went into injuries. Let's see. Beamer talked about some other stuff that was not necessarily about the game this week. And I want to save a little bit in terms of the game for later this week, right? Like we don't want to go ahead and hit it all today. Also, Jack and Kendall will be back on tomorrow. I think, Chris, they're going to talk a little bit of baseball and basketball then as well, because we had some people yesterday asking about that. And let's see. I'm going through Beamer's comments now. Hey, real quick. Beamer gave a lot of credit to Kentucky for their one-on-one tackling. And, if you're going to look at this South Carolina team, have there been at times some issues with tackling? I think, to be genuine, yes. Now, how much of that is, like you said, man, like I'm I'm going to steal your phrase, like they play with their hair on fire. And, that was one thing Cole Kubelik said is, hey, I have not seen a team in the country that flies to the football the way South Carolina's defense does. And so here's the question. Can you keep that same spirit while also getting yourself just a little bit more under control when it becomes time to get that ball carrier on the ground? Does that make sense? Like, can you rally to the football with that same energy, that same speed, that same just, hey, we're arriving with a bad attitude because we have bad intentions for you, but with a little bit more, let's break down and make sure we get this person on the ground. Like, I think that's a hard line to walk because you don't want to be tentative, right? Like you don't want to be slow to the football because you're so worried about a missed tackle. Not that I think this defense is going to do that, but with anything, there's always a line you have to walk between being out of control and just hustling your tail off, right? So I think for this defense, and they've been good, man, and this is one of the more fun to watch defenses that South Carolina has had in a long time. But if your goal is to not just kind of, win 6 games, win 7 games, but if your goal is like there's still a path to a like special season for South Carolina potentially. So if I'm looking at that, I'm saying, all right, let's have even higher expectations. This defense has been really good. What would put them over the top to be, I don't know, a top 4 defense in this league? I think it would be cleaning up the tackling just a little bit. And obviously that's something Kentucky did against Ole Miss. That's something that's going to be very key because Ole Miss, they will ultimately want to throw the football down the field. They want to stretch you vertically, but they will take what I call those easy access throws if they are there. So if they're there and they take them, if you're Carolina, Trey Harris, Juice Wells, Caden Lee, someone Chris and I were very familiar with from the recruiting process, you got to go up and tackle those guys.
Yeah, I was looking back after you said that, Wes. Kentucky, again, per PFF, so you can say yeah, I mean put an asterisk. So, but this is not a grade. This is I put a little bit more on like a little bit more weight on like the missed tackle numbers, right? Because it's not some grade or a percentage, but do build in some margin for error, whatever you think that should be. 8 missed tackles. That's a really good number in an SEC game for Kentucky against a team. A lot of times, we missed a lot of tackles. Well, who did you play? If you played a team with really good skill guys, you need to bake in that you're going to miss some tackles because even the best teams in the country are. They had 8 per PFF. So even if you say, that's BS, it was 12, whatever. That's a good number. And something else that stood out, Wes, only 1 missed tackle from somebody on the 3rd level of the defense. So all of the missed tackles were either guys on the defensive line or a linebacker, 1 missed tackle from a free safety in the secondary. Again, per PFF, that means you're not getting guys to the 3rd level, missing another tackle, and then a huge play. That was the biggest thing in this game. Kentucky was able to limit the explosive plays of Ole Miss, and one way you do that is you get them on the ground. Something Kirby Smart talked about in that classic Georgia-Bama game. Ryan Williams, super freshman from Bama, makes a great one-on-one play. That would have been a great play for Bama that put him in position, but what was the difference? Well, he spun out, made 2 guys collide into each other, and then outran them to the end zone. You got to get guys on the ground even when you give up an explosive play.
Where does that play rank for you?
I mean, man, just if he would have done that in the first quarter, you would have been like, holy cow. But the situation in which he did it, like, put 100 times the awesomeness of that play. I hadn't thought about it, man, because there's so many great plays I've seen, but just right off the top of my head, it is certainly one of the best I've seen.
I mean, dude, I actually love just the the context of the added humor in the context of football sometimes. Like the interview in the Kentucky game, the Carolina-Kentucky game, where they're interviewing Stoops, and I don't remember what he said, but he's just like, yeah, we got to get something going here. And then Nick Emmanwori picks off, like the very next frame you see is Nick picking the ball off and returning it. But this wasn't as drastic, but in that game, I'm assuming it was Herbstreit. He's like, all right, Alabama's got to settle down, get a good, easy throw here and get this drive started with a positive play. And Milroe's just like, nah, bomb to Ryan Williams. We're throwing this ball up. But that kid, he is the definition of built different, is Ryan Williams. Like, he is built different. But, man, the crazy thing is I feel like we have, I don't know, a Julio Jones, A.J. Green scenario. Jeremiah Smith for Ohio State, he's a freakazoid too. Like, he is an absolute stud. Like, which receiver are you taking?
I think Jeremiah Smith was the number 1 receiver in the country in that class, and I think Ryan Williams was number 3. Number 2 was what's his name from Auburn, Cam Coleman.
I've actually seen him in camp. Insane player in his own right. Now Ryan Ryan should be a senior in high school right now, as we've learned. So,
as we've been told.
But that adds to the, like, he would be the number 1 receiver in this class, I would think, easily. Probably number 1 overall player.
He's crazy. And look, and both of those guys, I mean, not 6'4", 230, like, just have some size, have some length to them, but they're just great receivers. So fun to watch, man. Fun to watch for sure. What a game that was too.
Yeah, no doubt, man. All right, y'all. Unless Chris has anything else, I think we'll call it a show for today. That play kind of reminds me, if you are near my age or Chris's age, some of those Reggie Bush plays back in the day where you're just like the one where he dives and flips into the end zone. He has like the little back juke on the sideline. Some of those plays back then where you're just shaking your head like, I've never seen a guy move like this at the college level. That's kind of what that play reminded me of. So anyway, all right, y'all, appreciate it as always. Appreciate all of our sponsors as always. We're going to get off here. Kendall and Jack will be back tomorrow. Chris and I will be back on Thursday. Lock this time in. Thursday, 2:00, live from BP Skinner in the Vista. Come out and see us. And from what I understand today, unless something happens right now, Connor Shaw back on the show Thursday to give his thoughts on Gamecocks versus Ole Miss. He's going to break it down for us along with myself and Chris Clark. So see y'all then. Again, Kendall and Jack tomorrow. Me and Chris back with Connor Shaw Thursday, 2:00. Appreciate y'all as always. Y'all have a good one. For Chris, I'm Wes.